So now, we begin again. At the exposure of everything, we're going to get back to tradition and balance. Yes, the two big numbers in this whole equation of things. Because of course we have to get back to tradition and balance all the time. To me, tradition and balance is like the speed limit. It's like all those signs you see. It's like a red light, a green light, all the things you see outside. That's what tradition and balance not mean to me, but end up being to me. So I guess you could say it's what it means to me, but literally, it can't mean anything more to me. For example, let's get back to the old fact. You know, me and John Perry didn't get along too well as little kids, but that was kind of like that old craze of breaking toys and being a toil of destruction with killing ants with a big mallet and tying up ropes to everything in the house and letting Mom wake up and, move when I tie it on her and everything falls down. So, it has to lead from that, obviously. And it has to lead from other things like making up fights of my own with the stuffed animals and everything. And, those kind of things. And going to the church and just wiping people's pants underneath the pews. That was a normal thing, I guess, for me when I was a kid. But it also was a normal thing to be that destructive in that sense. It's like me being destructive now by doing these complimentary conversations and making sure everything is a main word of tradition to me. This is tradition. But it's not really tradition, it's more of the habit that becomes the controller's idea. But who's the controller? Nobody. That's who I like. So let's get back to this whole thing of tradition and balance. Let's make it simple. Tradition. Now what exactly is tradition? How do we get taught tradition? Do we get taught tradition? Well, that's a whole identity of its own, because we don't know for sure. I don't think I've been taught tradition, and I'll tell you why. Mostly because, when I was a kid, mostly what I remember from childhood is a lot different. I remember going to SeaWorld when I was in 4th grade, I believe. I remember Tabasco sauce and soap in the mouth when I did something wrong. Grandma style. But that was no big deal. I'm just saying that's the stuff I remember. I don't know if I consider tradition, because I don't know what tradition was in that sense. I mean, back then, of course I didn't, because what I did mostly was jump around in my room and do exactly what I'm doing now. So, in fact, knowing tradition means I would have to actually establish it some part of my life. But that's not on my own, because that's like saying when you're a kid, you have to already establish these things, conditional things, and everything else kind of flows around. But see, at that point in history, of course Grandma wouldn't want me to go to the bank and take care of things. She did when she was young. So in fact, her identity of her tradition is not really tradition, it's more habit for me. And it starts with habit, That's why she likes it now. That's why she was fine with whatever. Nono Arthur didn't mind anything either. He was very patient. Very, 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 very patient. Let's put an emphasis on that, because you have to be very patient when somebody else's tolerations are over yours. But tolerations necessarily are not tolerations if they're just habits and everything else. It's more of a thing that just creates itself. And that's why I think, in a lot of ways, for example, I met a girl on the bus yesterday, and she looked at me, and I was just looking outside the bus, she probably got the impression I was staring at her, and that's what she said. She said, "You're an analyzer, aren't you?" And I don't mind people saying that. That's fine, asking me a question like that. I said, "Well, yeah, but I wasn't really, why do you ask?" She said, "Well, because, I saw the way you were looking, it kind of freaked me out." I was like, "Oh, okay, well, sorry, I wasn't looking directly at you, I was looking outside, because, obviously I was in the back of the bus this time. Luckily, because I wouldn't got to talk to anybody like that. In that way, I mean, because I talked about, all these audio recordings and everything else that I do. Well, not everything. I mean, I was getting off the bus, down the street, so I couldn't really talk the whole time. I just said, flamboyantly everything that I do in this whole contorted view. And I just said very quickly, I said, yeah, I basically am an analyzer, but I kind of just take one thing from people. Like, for example, see, she showed her eyes. She took up her eyeglasses and showed me she showed me her eyes. So I said, "Oh, okay." See, I took that. See, I don't take everything. I don't analyze everything from people. I take one part, and then I create my own after dark situation where it's like I'm going to build up everything and sort of make it this whole conundrum of instructions and mind temples and sort of create this whole idea from it. Well, that's exactly how I do it, because I'm not going to take everything. I'm not going to spark a whole jury out of everything and everybody. I'm going to create everything through one means and then sort of develop it from that with this whole idea. And that's exactly what happened. So I was talking to her and I was telling her, yeah, that's what I do most of the time. Then I talked about the audio recordings. Well, a lot of times I do conversations, just sort of record myself. I've been doing this since like '96, I could have brought up that it's almost like how Charlie Sheen talks, except I don't need the drugs, I don't need the drugs, the whatever, I don't need those things to act out like this, because I've been doing it since '96. It's not that difficult, I stopped for a while, obviously. I mean, just look at the years. First, I did it from 1996 to about 2000. Maybe actually earlier than that, because I probably did it from 96 to 98 more prolifically, and then I stopped for a while, started again in 2000, then I stopped very quickly at that point, and started again about 2003, and then I got more serious with it from 2003 to about 2007. Then I stopped 2008, 2009, and 2010, and now I'm back at it again. And I think it's good that I am back at it again, because those years that I skipped, I mean, look at it, from 1998 to about 2000, nothing much happened. It was mostly junior high, and some stuff did come up, and I should have recorded it all. I should have audio recorded and did the whole thing. If I knew there were digital recorders, which I think there were some digital recorders, or they may not have come along till later, but I knew they probably came along in the 2000s sometime. It had to have. It had to. And then I could have gotten one back then and done it that way, because the tape recordings aren't that great. That's why I'm transferring them. But let's look at the facts for a second there. This is my identity now. And I was telling her about that. I was like, I do the audio recordings and as people listen to them, and I just say, it's sort of this idea, Do you do a lot of conversations with people or so on and so forth? And I said, well, yeah, of course I do. Everyone talks to people, and obviously I do these conversations on my own where I record them and do this whole thing, And sort of just have this weird diabetical talk where it's like I'm gonna screw in the whole light bulb and screw it out without having the light go on. So let's begin with that displeasure, because we're going to talk about tradition and balance. Now, as I was saying, let's talk about balance for a second first. Let's get an introduction to balance. Now, what exactly is balance? Is there a defined definition of balance? Of course there is. But is there a definition of balance in a human? Yeah, there's no direct definition, because having balance doesn't necessarily mean that everyone else is going to agree with your balance. Because your balance may be something completely different than what the next person's going to throw at you, and what they're going to throw at you in their whole prerogative of living. So of course everyone's balance is going to be different. Duh, there's no way you can relate to another person's balance, because there's no way you can interrelate your own things, the things you do, when comparing to other people's balances. So of course there can't be this strict adherence to balance, having the same attitude and everything else, when you have completely different objectives in life. Of course. For example, myself. I like writing, reading, and I have to create a balance with that writing and reading, and running, and everything else that I do, and paranormal things. A lot of people don't have those, I personally need a balance for that, It's like I can't have animals around, for example. I'm fine with animals, I get along with them, but I don't want them, because no matter what, if I'm around animals, I just become an animal. And not literally like I become an animal, I'm a beast. No, I mean I literally cannot concentrate. Because to me, personally, an animal is something that needs to be, for example, a dog, it needs to have attention. I don't like that kind of attitude, And maybe that's why in a lot of ways stalkers didn't work, because they were just trying to get attention. And I didn't mind so much talking to them as when they started stalking me more, and they were so overt with it that it became a problem. I was like, how can you do this, First off, the first stalker didn't talk to me almost within 6 months. She was, doing this big display with cars and girls running around my car early in the morning. I mean, you're not going to get a good response from that. And in fact, you're probably going to get the worst response to that, because there's no alleviation to what it means. And if you're just trying to get that last dapple of, I'm going to make myself look weirder than you, it doesn't mean anything because you can't. There's no way you can be weirder than me, especially with those kind of circumstances if you don't talk to that person. Figure out why the hell you did that in the first place. Because obviously, the only intrigue you'll get is, I'm at ease with my uncomfortability towards you, Marcello. And that was the end of that. So the struggle is brought to the conclusion of a vase. And here we come again with this, which brings up the balance issue. Now what is balance? Do I have balance? Personally, I think I do. I probably have a lot more than I ever did, because during those middle periods where I stopped talking, for example, or even before that when I was talking, during those years where things were going downhill for a little bit, it brought me back up and made me parachute to everything else. And parachuted like fireworks displaying all night during 4th of July, if people still celebrate that, which is hardly done anymore. No fireworks in my neighborhood. Not for very few. It's not rocking the apartment anymore, let's just say that. But, I mean, that's the general aspect. Balance, this balance thing, yeah. I mean, balance is fine, but you can't copy somebody else's balance. Unless you're going to do the same things as them completely. You know? And that's the thing. It's like with, my grandma called when The Bachelor was on this past season. Okay, it's 2011, so obviously this past season, where the guy was slapped by a girl earlier in the season. Yeah, he was. And then later on, during the last one, the last girl that he was going to go with and marry, this is what happened. He said, I got to get approval from my parents. I was like, wow, where's the guy's balls? Oh, my brother, said that, but I was like, it's true. Literally, it becomes to the point of, you have to get the impression of your parents. To me, that's like, there's only so much balance you can expect in the world. Sometimes you have to go with a little imbalance. Sometimes you have to draw the whole aspect of, it's like digging up a grave. You gotta be careful of the rocks. But you can't get rid of the rocks, they're gonna still be in the dirt. You have to accept that. You have to accept that those rocks, piled together with the dirt. You can't get rid of it. You have to accept those things too. And see, that's where this whole balance thing kind of breaks me apart. It's just like with tradition. Tradition what? Personally, recently I've noticed what has happened throughout the years with this total tradition aspect that Grandma, for example, brings up. About cooking, holidays, so on and so forth. Tradition doesn't mean much. Not because it doesn't mean much to me or anything. It does, to a certain extent. But see, it doesn't mean enough to continue it. Because I've never been taught that. All I've been taught is, right now, for example, I usually go into the back room, check the computer for my grandma, and she doesn't call me back, or literally call me back with a frenzy sort of attitude, where it's like, you gotta do this, you gotta do this. It doesn't happen too much. And see, that's the thing. We're developing these sort of instincts with it. Harboring this sort of nature with it. And we just kind of say, we're going to cradle these things together and make ourselves with it. But we can't all the time. Because we don't develop with it completely on our own. When we do develop completely with it on our own, then we have this sort of foreshadowing of ideas like the hairy chest of a man. So what do we do then? Nothing. We don't create anything. We just sort of eliminate every aspect and we sort of create our own. The aspects of everything necessarily are going to be completely different. And it has to do with many things. Television's around, music, radio's around. All these things that weren't around during Grandma's first ignition in the world are around now. So obviously there's going to be that flip mirror effect. You got whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. You get a close mirror, and then you flip it over, mirror's further away. That's exactly how life is now. One is closer, the other one is further. So guess what? That's going to change your balance. That's going to change your tradition. No matter how much you try to affect it to bring it back the other way, you're not going to get it. You're going to try to grab for something, and if you try that hard, you may get it, true. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a happy person with it. In fact, a lot of people fall back because of that, because they can't take that sort of mentality of it, where it's like, it doesn't really fit into anything anymore. For example, like my grandma would say, oh, well, John Pierre's probably pissed off because he can't, take care of the laundry on his own anymore. Or no, he has to take care of the laundry on his own anymore. He has to take care of the laundry. So guess what happens? He gets angry, he gets upset. That's why there's fighting going on between him and Mamina, because Danielle's not taking care of his stuff. So since Mamina did, that's why he's getting upset. That's why he's getting upset with her at all, or saying anything to her that's upsetting. To me, that's ridiculous. Because personally, I don't see my brother getting upset about those kind of things. In fact, he's fine with it. I've never seen him complain about, oh, I gotta do laundry now, In fact, what he said mostly is, now I can take care of myself. There's no one I'm looking for any kind of situation with those things. These are things that I'm taking care of. It may take some time, but you know what? That's exactly what it's meant for. You gotta drown out and make everything come back. Sometimes you gotta just live that way. There's a certain thing that's not in this whole balance and tradition thing is acceptance. We don't really see that. And no flexibility shit. I'm not gonna talk about flexibility because that's like pulling a chicken, that's rubber or something, It's the most ridiculous, most tart thing to say, because flexibility is not going to happen with these things. Because balance is not flexibility. Flexibility is earning your own balance. Creating your own balance. That's how you do it. And you create it from many things. You don't just create it from your indignified family, which goes along with yesterday's talk in my class. Tradition, balance, yes, of course. The flocking bird. It's not going to work. Because if you stick to one thing as the main subject in the hierarchy of family, for example, what about all the other atrocities of life? And not atrocities so much as a bad thing. The atrocities mean everything outside of it, and the past, and everything else that wasn't included in this short story, to give it enough emphasis about why this person has a strong personality, and why they're not creating their own tradition and balance from the same thing as their mother. To me, we're emptying things that should have been there too. They may not have belonged there within the family, but it doesn't matter. It still affects. It still creates. It's like my grandma saying, well, you gotta get influenced by us. Well, it's not gonna work. Because there's other things that are influencing us. Whether or not it's a small prerogative and grabbing the whole and sort of making it come out, you can't have been there the whole time when I was in elementary, junior high, high school. Heck, I personally was okay going to Fetty or whatever would have been here at the schools. Our teacher would have been fine. I don't care. I didn't have that many problems at elementary school. It's my grandma, for example, that did. My mom. But my mom didn't even ask me. Personally, I was like, you do what you want, but I personally feel fine. I was not hounded like a dog. In fact, I probably had more problems because of going over there. Let's see, a guy pushes me down in 8th grade. Guess what? That didn't happen over here. I didn't have a ripped jugular side of my elbow bleeding in elementary school. That happened over there in Cyprus. And just look at that. And then let's move on further. High school. Oh yes, of course, the granular aspect of everything. Somehow, I had a good friendship that ended bad and rotted inside a year. And guess what? This friendship didn't start good because I didn't realize, somebody could actually use something as pathetic as, my friends graduated from last year, you want to be my friend? And see, you think anyone would have done that here at Artesia High School? ABC district, nobody would have done that shit. Thankfully, and see, that's the emptiness of everything, the shield of everything, the shell of everything. There would have been no interruption in my life. Not to say it wasn't earned or respected, because of course it's respected, but it also emptied the shield that made it ever go infiltrate, and I'm going to make sure that it doesn't happen again. The news is clear. The news is clear in this. Tradition and balance? Nah, not so easy. Not so easy and breezy. Because I surely have not seen complete balance anywhere within this. It's pretty simple. the identity of everything was that my grandma's gotten pretty upset with me at certain things, especially. I mean, she's hounded me in front of my face about things. I remember something about immigrants or something, illegals and everything, and she was getting angry with me in front of my face, and I was like, yeah, I still held my own. Because personally, it's not the only problem. In fact, it's created as one of the problems so that we imagine that if we get rid of that, there's only one boogeyman. There's only 2 or 3 boogeyman, and the rest are good. I mean, it goes on this list. We throw ourselves into the doghound because we don't want to do things slowly, so we create this sort of thing. We have to do only this, and then everything will go back in order. Yeah, everything doesn't go back in order when you're in the year 2011 and you expect it to be the year 1927. It's not gonna happen. Don't be a jokester. All these things did not happen subliminally. All these things did not happen to make us say, it has to be that. No, it was psychological war and everything else, so that we imagine that these are the problems only, and we don't care about those problems, of course, because we jump ourselves around by making everything look like a drowned whale. That huge of a problem. Yeah, right. We've already created a menace, and it's in our minds. And then we blame it on, well, it has to be people who question government. Yeah, of course, because everything leads back to people that question government? Not very. Most people did not question much government that had been evil. They actually created those governments. So I wonder why it is that most conspiracy theorists gets blamed for things that are going wrong. Yeah, that's a joke. Conspiracies have existed in more aspects than one. The first terrorist attack as such, still an open case. And it actually happened here. Biggest joke in the world. We think other countries created that. Let's just make sure. Commander Shampoo, you got a joke coming on, cause damn, did I see this one coming. And it's just like how I thought as a kid. I don't feel represented by my politicians or my government. And I don't. Because they are not my government. My country, I'm still fighting for it. Just like they did 1776, and before that, and before that. And they kept those people alive that disagreed with it too. That's one of the things I was talking about in this class too. Not this semester, but with the same teacher. I was discussing why they would keep those people alive that disagreed with them. It seems almost like, well, why would you leave people alive that came from the same country as you, that disagreed with you completely? What would be the purpose? Didn't have an answer to that. And I was like, I don't get it. Why would you leave those people alive? There's no reason. In fact, that's actually the most mutual condescending thing that doesn't make sense in this. Because it's like saying, well, you know, we agree with this, and we're going to leave these people alive that don't agree with us. That are the same race as us, too, somehow. Somehow there are people who disagree with us. Of course there are. There are going to be people who disagree with you within your own ranks, because you have to realize that not everybody's going to fall for that kind of power stable idea that sort of mixes horses with beer cans, you know. You're not going to get that sort of thing where everybody's going to agree, because everybody's balance is a tundrum of ideas. The fluctuating mind that just goes whoosh. Not everybody thinks with the instinct. A lot of people think with, well, a lot or a little, actually use the rest of it. Not the instinct, not the complete habitual state where you're stopping, because that's the complete habitual state where you're stopping, and it's like two hands that are planted straight, that have the fingers up, that hit each other, pom, 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 and that's exactly how people are thinking. Just that pom, 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 pom. They don't go past it either. They go whoosh, 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 and it just keeps on hitting forever, hitting. And then it never goes past that. So we bring it up again. Balance and tradition. Yes, of course, balance and tradition. How do we make things balanced, though? Well, of course, somebody else has to horrendously stop your flexibility by saying, I'm going to be flexible with you. But I have my own balance, and I have my own traditions. So you can't really be flexible if there's this flinging of tradition and balance in your life. That's completely different from another person's, because it's going to be completely different from another person's, because you already know that everything has flakily changed in the complete lifestyle change of of throwing yourself into another generation. Of course, generation, that word. We're humans, but of course we have to use generation to flawlessly say that everything's changed so much. I'm bringing myself down to tears with that one. Mostly because it's not the flower that springs us, it's the leaves that fall to the ground that make us go crying. So I'm here to make it straight. Because obviously somebody's balance is going to be going downhill. Other people's balance is going to go uphill, and we're going to flock the sheep and sort of say, you're out of here, buddy. I'm out of here, buddy. That's what Jean-Pierre did. Out of the cage, out of the balance. Out of the other person's balance, out of the tradition that's not really intended, because it doesn't make sense to be intended, because it can't be intended. Because if it was intended, it would have been intended to be done. And it never was. Oh, and the hoedown begins, because all of a sudden, tradition and balance have this whole aspect to itself. But it can't be done that way. Because if it was, it would have been done many years ago. Not today, not tomorrow. It would have been done so long ago, it wouldn't be remembered how it started. It would have just become the enveloping habit and conclusive way of things now. It wouldn't have taken till 27 to be done, or 26. For example, just like the foreskin that's on my penis. It wouldn't have been done when I'm 24 if I was supposed to be taught with words only when I was 6. Because words do not fluctuate to action. So somehow, even if I'm told once, that's how you clean, that doesn't necessarily mean I remember on Halloween or any other day of the year. And I did not. So somehow the balance and tradition can't work out completely, can it? The canon was burst so many years ago that we don't see anybody answering those questions anymore, just like war. You sort of say the bad habits are gone, I'm gonna make it, and I'm gonna remember every single aspect, and all you remember is what you're carrying in your backpack. So guess what? That's the ideal sense. We break, we make, we have, we don't, we make, we take, and we balance our own balance, our own things, our own ideas, because we can't look at things with, well, we don't want to take on our bosses. Of course not. We don't want to take on our bosses. That's why you have to respect your parents, respect their traditions, and wallow up inside the cage of picking up that wind with a macaroni and cheese in its hellhole of a life, with the sun bearing down, with no other idea what to do except blare harder, blare harder. I'm gonna make you sweat. Within a lifetime, you can't even make yourself sweat. So what is balance and tradition? Let's just put it this way. My balance is mine. There you go. What's the old saying? Habits have to be changed? We'll see about that. Because habits are not necessarily habits if you can break them yourself. And stop them yourself. It's not very much of a habit if you can do that and sort of go around the steel bend and unbend it yourself. Because I sure can. Not literally, but I can stop many things very quickly and start them up very quickly. So in fact, my habit is my own exploitation and tradition. But it also creates another thing. How can I get your tradition? No, I can't. Because you did it. How am I supposed to do something you did? I wouldn't have to do it if you're doing it. Whoa. Let's jump the gun on that one. Let's find the old tiger lily on that one. You won't. Because tradition and balance don't go together. And they don't rock a feather of life. Because the character, that's oppression in itself, is saying that we have to use the same balance and tedium of thought and sort of create the tradition, the same thing. Well, that's oppression in itself. You can say it's oppression to the old aspects and the old history and the old everything because it came from something from the past of American history or American life or through ever life, and so you just create this whole void of ideas because you don't want to lose the aspect. Well, that's fine for you. But you don't need the tradition to be continued if you don't believe in the balance of another person, of the tradition of another person. So in fact, why would you want that balance to continue or tradition to continue if you don't accept the balance and tradition of another person in your life, of your grandson or your son or your daughter or anybody else that's related to you? Why would you want them to continue that aspect of that name, of that idea, of everything else, if you know that you don't accept those kind of balances and those kind of traditions? Of course, you don't have to call them balances or traditions, because, well, I guess you could call it balance, but everyone has their own. So, I mean, I'm here to make it clear. Level-ended ground. That's not going to stop with an American house. And that's how you gotta live all over the world. I don't believe that, because I think anybody can live any way they want. If they want to live in a hut, they can live in a hut. If they want to live on a spoon, they can live on a spoon. And there you go. If they want to live on a rock, sit in a rock, play on a rock, throw themselves up in the grass, and sort of land with that fluctuating ground and fluctuating wind, let them. As the old aspect goes, you can't destroy a tenor by making the world surrender to a baritone. Because I can see everything within your aspects. Oh yeah, yeah, the old dice. Red eye. Snake eyes. Whatever you want to call it. Yeah, we'll see it. We'll see it throw itself out with the 2s and 3s and 4s and 6s and 8s and 9s. We're going to see it all. Because we're going to see exactly what this whole balance and tradition issue is. Because I can see it. I can see it clearly. Oppression comes from oppressing the ones that break the balance and traditions. That's oppression. Oppression is not taking away our history, because that's already been taken away by a glossed over idea and fact of, we gotta look at everything good of, or else you're anti-American of, or you're anti-the world of, or you're anti-peace of, and you're anti-O of, and then we see exactly what love is of. It doesn't create itself by bringing the balance together, by making everybody one tender feather, because you can't surrender, because you can't come out of that circle by breaking the void. You're going to be destroyed by the instincts. Everything that's an instinct, we have our own instinct. That's why we create our own balances in sync. We don't need the tradition of a family or a unit that comes with a balancing mind, because we're going to create our own. By looking at everything like board and room, yeah, that's going to help us feel good about the child that we consume and make ourselves lives throughout the whole aspect, and we throw them out when they're 18, or we find out there's some other excusable matter that makes ourselves go down every bid sheet. So, what's going to make me cry more? Becoming the tradition and balance of my family, or going out of it? What's going to make my family cry more? Of those two things. Obviously, Mom won't cry about me having my own balance and traditions, and not having my own traditions, for example. Because what are traditions except our own ideas and habits and everything else? We've already knocked that one down the door. And just like it, 2 weeks left in the semester, guess what happens? Well, my grandma says, oh, the semester's almost over. You must not be doing that much now. Oh, you're wrong about that. And the throwing sword begins. And so, the aspect of things are pretty simple. Obviously, I don't have a hierarchy of mind to say, oh, I'm better than you because I'm going to college. No. Actually, I'm worse than you because I'm going to college, because you can't understand college. Damn it. There's nobody here to help me as much. There's no tutor in my head or teacher right next to me going, Marcello, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. And boom, the breaking tide. Tradition and balance cannot work in that kind of aspect, because there's nobody here throwing their life at me. But I'm not looking for that. Am I? Because if I was, wouldn't I have my stalker around still? Wouldn't I be with her? No. Because that didn't work. Too fast, too jerky. And too much of a balance issue there. But balance issue not in the way you would think. In fact, the balance wasn't the problem. It was actually something else completely. It was the irrelevant fact of not accepting the boomage of everything. The split, the erect split, the making of a disaster that knew was coming. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Never understanding another person's position. And position doesn't necessarily mean there's only two positions. There's There's 6.7 billion. There's so many, you'd probably have a nightmare if you knew all the positions that you could take. And I'm here. So you break those balances, you break those traditions. Not of, nihilistic or anarchistic or moralistic or exploitation or whatever. It's not about that. You put a label on it, you're never going to do anything else in life. You're going to be scared, afraid. Fear. Yeah. That's where the balance and tradition starts from. You can't break them, so buy them. I'm not. I've already made up my surmise. Sarcasm and cynicism is not my life. My life is pretty simple. It's a dibble of a band that you'll never see because you'll throw yourself at the other rotting wall. I won't. I've seen the rotting wall. A lot of people are there. They're having fun. I'm done with that. Take care.